I still remember that sound more than anything else. It was as if the sky had torn apart when the first rocket hit a residential building on the other side of the river. It's impossible to forget a sound like that. It's not like in the movies. It's lower, heavier, as if someone had thrown a mountain on your chest, and all you can hear is its echo. By that time, the war had been going on for several months. It was early 2022. Snow was sticking to the debris, and black smoke made the sky look older than it really was. I was already in uniform, already calling the men I had met 2 weeks ago brothers. We were all still pretending that this was temporary, that we would push them back, sign some papers, return home, and start complaining about trivial things again: traffic jams, taxes, football. But their rockets continue to fall on schools, hospitals, and houses with toys still lying in the yards. We listened to the radio announcement. There are no military targets in this area. When you hear that sentence often, something changes inside you. There is a special kind of inhumanity in pressing a button, knowing that a rocket will fall on a playground. Sometimes we intercepted their radio communications. They laughed. It stuck in my memory. Grown men laughed while someone's grandmother was being pulled out from under the concrete on our side. I remember one of their voices, calm and bored. "We hit the supermarket. Nice fireworks." Fireworks. Now people ask me, "What made you strong?" As if strength is some kind of routine in the gym, some kind of motivational poster. I don't know if I'm strong. I just know that there comes a moment when you either break or harden around the crack. For me, that moment came that winter, when I stood on the ruins of a bus stop, holding a rifle in my hands, looking at the glow of another burning building on the horizon, and realizing that someone, somewhere, had pressed a button and didn't care who would die.
That's when I stopped thinking about it as politics or borders on a map. For us, it became simple. They turned our cities into targets and our civilians into statistics. If that's not inhuman, then I don't know what is. At the time, I didn't know that I would soon meet some of these people. I didn't know what faces were behind those voices, or how casually they talked about what they had done. That came later, on a foggy morning near a village you've never heard of, where war ceased to be distant explosions and became a conversation I can't forget. You might think that the worst thing you learn about war is what you see. It turns out that often it's what you hear. We dug in near a small village that is barely visible on the map. 3 streets, 1 store, a school, a church. Half of the houses had already been destroyed. The other half pretended to still be homes. Curtains on the windows, paintings on the walls, plastic flowers in the windows that trembled every time the artillery fired a few kilometers away from us. The nights were the hardest. Too quiet and too loud at the same time. Every distant explosion, every bark of a dog, every snore of a drunk soldier in a nearby trench could be heard. That night, we sat around a small, modest fire hidden behind a piece of metal and passed around a bent thermos of coffee that tasted like boiled socks. Then Andriy said, "Guys, did you hear what happened in the neighboring town?" His voice was too calm, as if he were asking if we had heard a joke. That's always a bad sign. "No," I said. "What now?" He moved closer, pulled his scarf up to his mouth as if he were cold, but I could see his hands shaking. They shelled a residential area again. There were no soldiers there, only people. Rockets, cluster bombs. They're still figuring it out. My friend from the 93rd Regiment was there. He sent me a voice message. He took out his phone. The battery was at 6%. Taking a risk, he turned on the speaker and held the phone in the middle of our small circle. You could hear the man breathing heavily, the wind whistling in the microphone, sirens wailing in the distance, as if the city were screaming. In the background, there was a loud noise, someone screaming. Then the voice returned, closer, quieter.
He pulled the girl out from under the doorframe. She was holding a cat that was already dead. She asked him to save the cat. I didn't know what to say. Tell Andriy that we're okay. The message ended. No one spoke for a while. Only the fire crackled quietly, as if ashamed to make any sound. Maybe they don't know, muttered one of the younger guys. Bogdan. 19 years old, with a childish face, he still wore the same worn bracelet that his girlfriend had given him. Maybe the Russians who are launching these missiles don't know what they're hitting. Do you think it's possible not to know something in today's world? I asked. After that, he fell silent. An hour later, as if the universe wanted to emphasize this point, we caught part of their radio conversation. Our communications officer, Taras, called us over and turned up the volume. A Russian voice rang out, muffled but clear enough. Yes, we are illuminating this area well. Did you see the video? Women running around in bathrobes. Ha! One was carrying a pot, as if she was going to continue cooking. Another voice replied cheerfully, We should have recorded that. We could have made a meme. Morning in Ukraine or something like that. They were joking, really joking, as if they were talking about some football match they had watched, not about people running out of burning houses. Suddenly, I felt something strange, not just anger, some kind of detachment. It was as if I had left my body and was watching myself listen. I saw my hands, dirty and cracked, gripping the radio so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My reflection in the broken window next to me. Empty eyes, an oversized helmet, pressed lips. Is this what strength looks like? I asked myself. Because I didn't feel strong. I felt like a dam that had cracked and was waiting for the rest to collapse. Later that night, something else happened. Around 3 in the morning, we heard the sound of an engine. It wasn't our usual supply truck. The sound was too light, too nervous. We were on alert, whispering and communicating with gestures. It turned out to be an old Lada with its headlights off, creeping along the dirt road as if it were sneaking. Of course, we stopped it, threatening it with our weapons. A man in a civilian jacket over his pajamas got out of the car, wearing half-frozen slippers on his feet. Next to him was a teenager, about 10 years old, wrapped in a blanket with dinosaur pictures on it. The man raised his hands, trembling. Ours, he said quickly. Don't shoot, we're from there. He pointed his thumb in the direction from which he had come. Where? I asked. From the city they bombed, he replied. We were in the basement. The whole building was shaking. They were shouting through loudspeakers, you know? Evacuate, Nazis, or we'll cleanse the city. His voice trembled on the word, cleanse. He looked at me as if asking for permission to continue. Finish, I said quietly. They didn't give us time, he whispered. They say, evacuate or die, and then they shoot anyway. My neighbor tried to escape with her mother. At the checkpoint, they laughed at her. One of them pointed at the old woman and said, What, is she your commander? A famous Ukrainian general? Then they fired over their heads and made them crawl through the mud. My mother slipped. They laughed. They let them go, but I don't think they cared. His son suddenly spoke in a sharp voice. One of them took my headphones and said that where I was going, I wouldn't need music, his son said. For some reason, this stuck in my memory. Of all the horrors, it was this petty theft, this stupid, petty cruelty. We took them in, gave them tea that tasted like metal, and a corner in the dugout to sleep. The boy couldn't sleep. He just stared at the ceiling, his eyes wide open in the flickering light, as if waiting for it to fall on him again. That night, I made a real discovery. Not from the news, not from official briefings. It was what I heard, a voice message from Andriy's friend, the sound of Russian laughter, the quiet words of a man in frozen slippers, the anger in his son's eyes. Then I realized, this was not just a war. It was a machine built on mockery and rockets, on humiliating people before killing them, or instead of killing them. A system in which someone could steal a boy's headphones and feel like a hero by pressing a button that destroyed an entire family. After that, every time I heard a rocket whistling overhead, I heard more than just metal and fire. I heard their jokes, their memes, their pretty fireworks. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, something inside me turned into a cold, unyielding promise. If I ever met any of these people face to face, I wouldn't be the one laughing. It wasn't like a battle from a movie. No heroic attacks, no slow-motion shots. It all started with a stupid mistake. Ours, not theirs. We were told that their reconnaissance group was in the east, moving through the forest like ghosts. So we watched the east. We set up an ambush there. We rehearsed our lines, our firing angles, like in a bad amateur play. They came from the north. The first thing I noticed was the smell of cigarette smoke in the wind. It shouldn't have been there. Everything around us already smelled like smoke. But this smell was fresh, sharp, with hints of cheap tobacco. Then we saw shadows moving along the ditch by the road, too organized to be civilians. We barely had time to regroup.
For 30 seconds, chaos reigned. Screams, gunshots, someone swearing loudly in Russian, someone else shouting in Ukrainian not to shoot because he had moved too far forward. One of them stood up to throw a grenade and slipped on the icy edge of the ditch. The grenade flew somewhere behind him and exploded with an angry rumble, covering us all with mud. He lay there, stunned, one leg waving in the air as if arguing with gravity. By the time he figured out which way was up and which was down, my rifle was already aimed at his chest. "On the ground," I barked. "Face down, hands forward." He obeyed. That was the first surprise. I expected more bravado, more drama. Instead, he lay in the frozen mud like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. A few seconds later, the other one jumped out of the ditch, raising his weapon halfway. Bogdan knocked him down before I could fire, with a clumsy, desperate move that resembled a football foul more than a military maneuver. They fell together, wrestling in the mud, groaning and swearing. At one point, they both reached for the same pistol and managed to throw it into a nearby puddle. It splashed into the water. Bogdan later swore that he did it on purpose. I don't believe him. In the end, it was all over quickly. One of them was killed, 3 were wounded, 4 were disarmed and stood on their knees with their hands behind their heads, their breath evaporating in the cold air. One of our guys had a bullet graze on his arm and wounded pride. We searched them, of course, standard procedure. Then I got a second surprise. The youngest of them, with cheeks still pink, as if he had never shaved properly, had a phone with a backlit screen in his pocket. A little girl with pigtails, maybe 4 years old, holding a teddy bear. The home screen showed notifications for new messages from Mom and Lisa Hartmut. Dozens of messages, unread. He noticed me looking at the phone and lifted his chin, as if challenging me to say something. "Do you have a daughter?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded briefly. "And you still fired rockets at residential buildings?" He looked at me as if I were speaking Martian. "I'm artillery support, not rockets," he replied automatically. His first instinct was to correct the type of weapon. Then, after a second, he added, "Besides, we were told there were Nazis in those buildings. A command post, they said. We're liberating people." He said liberating without irony. That was the third surprise. I thought they knew. I thought that deep down, they all knew. One of the older Russians, broad-shouldered with the permanent squint that some men get from years of smoking and lack of sleep, snorted. "We are liberating," he repeated, twisting the word as if it were a joke. "Tell him what you told us yesterday, Sasha, about the supermarket." The youngest, an artilleryman, turned pale. "Shut up," he muttered. "No, no," said the older man, now smiling, even with his hands tied behind his back. "Tell our Ukrainian friend how you watched the drone video, right? How the rockets hit the supermarket and people ran out of there like ants. You said it was funny, remember?" I felt my jaw clench. "You laughed?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, then looked away. His shoulders slumped. "We were drunk," he muttered. "They make us watch these videos. They say it's for training.
What do you want us to do? Cry? Yes, I said. That would be a start. The older Russian threw his head back and actually laughed. A full, hearty laugh, as if he had just heard the punchline of a witty joke. You Ukrainians are sentimental idiots, he said. Cry, don't cry. It won't change anything. The rockets don't care. Orders don't matter. Do you think your commanders never hit civilians? Where do you think your bullets go when you miss, hero? I was struck not by what he said, but by how calmly he said it, sitting on his knees in the dirt with plastic ties around his wrists. It was as if he had long since come to terms with being a scoundrel. He had nothing left to be ashamed of. The other one, quieter, with the bandage we had just put on his bleeding leg, finally spoke. "Shut up, Kolya," he muttered. "You talk too much." I turned to him. "And you? What did they tell you?" He shrugged, wincing in pain as the movement touched his wound. "The same as everyone else. Nazis, biolaboratories, NATO everywhere. If you don't leave, they'll come to your city. The usual stories." He paused, then looked me straight in the eye. I didn't believe it all, but I believed enough to leave. It's my fault. Such honesty. That was unexpected too. Then why mock people? I asked. Why humiliate them? The old woman at the checkpoint, the boy with headphones. He raised his head. What boy with headphones? I hesitated. It felt strange to tell them stories about their own army. There was a city they bombed, I said. One of you said to a child, "You won't need music where you're going," and took away his headphones. Something flashed across his face, anger perhaps, not at me. "This isn't war," he muttered. "It's just pigs being pigs." Kolya, the one who had been laughing, rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go. Our moral philosopher has arrived. Listen, Ukrainian, want to hear a story? I'll tell you a good one." He leaned forward slightly, checking to see if the ropes binding him had loosened, then smiled when he saw that they hadn't. "Near Kherson," he began, "we stopped the bus. Old men, old women, children, everyone was trying to leave. The team says, 'Check for saboteurs.' We do so. One old man refused to open his bag. My friend said, 'What are you hiding, old man? A machine gun?' The old man spat at him. Then my friend took the bag, opened it. It turned out there was only bread in it, stale bread. He threw it on the ground, stepped on it, crushed it in the mud, and he said, 'Now you have nothing to run away with.'" He looked me in the face as he spoke, as if waiting for a reaction, for some proof that he had impressed me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Because you asked about inhumanity. You want to know what kind of people we are, right? This is what we are. There's no point in pretending. Some of us like it, some of us don't. But we're all swimming in the same sewer." The quiet guy with the leg injury looked sick. "It wasn't your friend," he said slowly. "It was you." Kolya smiled even wider. "Does it matter?" For a moment, all I could hear was the quiet hiss of the wind in the broken branches above us. My brothers beside me shifted, fingers on the triggers, ready for the situation to escalate. The Russian prisoners knelt in a ragged line, breathing mist, their hands tied, telling stories as if they had been waiting months for someone to listen. Then something truly unexpected happened. From behind the trees behind us, an accented voice shouted, "Hey, don't shoot! I'm coming out!" We all froze. We raised our weapons again. Another Russian soldier ran out from behind the trees, alone, with his weapon above his head, clearly with the safety on. He spoke Ukrainian like someone who had grown up with it and then lost it because of television. "I surrender," he said. "I got lost in the chaos. I'm done. I don't want this anymore." We searched him and found cheap, cracked headphones carefully wrapped around the pack of cigarettes in his breast pocket. Ukrainian made. There were stickers on the side, little stickers with dinosaurs. My stomach clenched. "Where did you get them?" I asked. He glanced at the other prisoners, then back at me. "At the checkpoint, 2 weeks ago," he said. "There was a boy there, I moved closer. "He what?" "He looked scared," the man muttered. "One of our guys took his headphones and made a joke." After they left, I went back, found the boy, gave him some bread, and then, when our guy got drunk, I took his headphones. I planned to give them back somehow. I don't know. Stupid, right? I kept them as punishment, I guess. A reminder. He swallowed hard. "I don't know if that makes me a better person or just another rotten guy," he added. Behind me, Bogdan whispered, "Those are the same stickers the boy had." And suddenly, I understood everything. The mocking voices on the radio, the man in slippers, the boy with empty ears, and now this. One of the enemies wearing stolen headphones, like a guilty conscience tucked into his pocket. It turned out that confrontation is not just weapons and shouting. It was this: men kneeling, half frozen, telling ugly little stories, because silence had become heavier than words. I had always imagined Russian soldiers as a single, solid wall of cruelty. That day, that wall cracked a little. I saw what was behind it. Cowards, sadists, true believers, tired men, boys who laughed at the explosions in the drone footage, and others who quietly gathered evidence of their side's sins. Did that make me hate them less? No. But it made the hatred more complex, and somehow more painful. People think that the emotional part hits you in the big moments, the shootouts, the explosions, the dramatic events. For me, it started the next morning, when nothing was happening. We moved the prisoners to a dilapidated barn on the edge of the village. The roof was almost completely destroyed, the walls were leaning, and old hay was scattered around like dried-up memories. We gave them blankets, which were barely enough for ourselves, and tied their hands in front of them, not behind, so that they could at least drink water without help. Of course, this was done in accordance with the Geneva Convention, but also simply so as not to be like them. That morning was quiet. Too quiet. There was no shelling yet, only a low fog lying over the fields, as if the earth was trying to hide. I went in to check on them. Kolya, the loud one, was snoring. The older smoker was awake, staring at the hole in the roof, where a piece of sky looked as if it had been cut out with scissors. The artilleryman was shivering under the blanket. The one with the dinosaur-shaped headphones, the one who had taken them from his friend, was also awake, twisting the cable around his fingers like a rosary. "Do you need anything?" I asked in an even voice. He looked at me in surprise. "Need?" he repeated, as if he hadn't used the word in years. "I need it to be a bad dream. Do you have one?" I smiled involuntarily. It just ended. He even smiled a little. It threw me off balance. You don't expect to be half-jokingly talking to someone who shot at you yesterday. Then the artilleryman spoke in a hoarse voice. "Can I ask you something?" I shrugged. "You can try." "How bad is it really?" he asked. "Those rockets, the ones they say are hitting military infrastructure. Is that true? Supermarkets, apartments, like you said?" I felt the old anger flare up again. By now it was automatic, like a reflex. "You heard the intercept," I said. "You saw the drone footage. You told them it was ridiculous, and now you're confused?" He flinched as if I had hit him. "Yes," he whispered. "I know what I said, but knowing it and knowing it, it's not the same thing. Do you understand me?" I didn't want to understand him. That was the problem. Understanding him would be like betraying everyone who had died. "Do you want details?" I said. "Okay. The supermarket you laughed at? My friend's aunt was there, buying bread. They found her under a collapsed wall, holding a bag of groceries. They only recognized her by the scarf she always wore. Is that enough for you? His eyes filled with tears, unexpectedly. I imagined that he would either defend himself or double down, but not this.
At that moment, Kolya woke up, because of course he woke up. The perfect moment, the favorite clown of the universe. "Oh, look," he said, stretching as far as his tight hands would allow. "Group therapy. Now we're sharing our feelings? Guys, do you want to hold hands too?" I turned to him. "Why did you step on that old man's bread?" I asked suddenly, sharply. "What did he do to you?" He shrugged lazily. "He was in the wrong place," he said, "at the wrong time, with the wrong flag." "And that's it?" I asked. "You're humiliating an old man who fled the war because of a piece of cloth?" "It's never just a piece of cloth," he said. "Yours, ours, it's always more than that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, would we?" He was right, and I hated that he was right, and I hated that he was right. You see the problem. When I left the barn, my hands were shaking, not from the cold, from anger. But beneath the anger lay something else, something softer and much more dangerous. Doubt. Not doubt about the war. We were defending our home, that was clear. Doubt about my own heart, about what this hatred was doing to it. It's strange how quickly anger wears you out. For months it had been my armor. Every time I saw the destroyed school, every time I heard their laughter on the radio, I felt that same tight, hot feeling in my chest that helped me keep going. Anger is a great fuel. It burns clean, it burns hot. But it doesn't last forever. That evening, we came under fire again. Not heavy, just a few angry shots in our direction. One of them hit close enough to make the storeroom shake. Dust fell from the rafters. Someone inside let out a muffled cry in Russian before remembering not to show their fear in front of us. We huddled in the trench, listening. "Do you think they're trying to save their guys?" Bogdan asked. "I doubt it," I replied. "They don't usually care enough to be that accurate." The truth is, I didn't care why. I just listened to the rumble of distant cannons and the whistle of flying shells and felt tired. Not fear, not anger, just tiredness that penetrated my bones, my soul. Another surprise. In the middle of the shelling, my brain decided to show me the most absurd image. Not bodies, not fire. A little girl on a phone wallpaper holding a teddy bear. My throat tightened. What kind of world is this, I thought, where this child's father is shooting at mine? Where I sit in a trench and dream of never seeing his face again, and his daughter is probably drawing pictures of him coming home with sweets? Do you understand why it hurts? If they were all pure monsters, it would be easier, cleaner, but they're not. They're people who made the choice. Some actively, some passively, some half drunk to drown out their doubts. And me? What has this war done to me? Later that night, I was assigned to guard duty in the storeroom. Just me, my rifle, and the quiet sound of Russian snoring and occasional muttering in the darkness. Around 3 in the morning, I heard quiet sobbing. At first, I thought it was one of our younger guys. Then I realized the sound was coming from inside. I hesitated for a second, then opened the door. The artilleryman was sitting with his back to the post, his face hidden in his bound hands, his shoulders shaking. The others were asleep, or pretending to be asleep. "Hey," I said. He flinched, as if he had been hit, tried to wipe his face on his shoulder, but couldn't. "Allergies," he muttered. "In winter?" I raised an eyebrow. He chuckled softly. "Okay, not allergies." I just stood there, feeling strangely out of place in my own clothes. "Why are you crying?" I finally asked. It didn't sound gentle. It sounded tired. He shrugged helplessly. "Because I believed them," he said. "Because I thought I was a hero. Because I thought the people in those buildings were worse than me. And now I'm sitting here and you're giving me water and I don't know how to live with that." Something changed in me. Not forgiveness, don't get me wrong, but something like
recognition. I knew that feeling. The moment when the story in your head shatters and reality fills you. In my first month here, I said slowly, surprising myself, I saw our artillery destroy a Russian position. I cheered. I really cheered. Then we went to check it out. One of your guys was lying there, half under a broken tree. He was my age. Same stupid beard, same shoe size. He had a photo in his pocket. It was him and his friends at a barbecue. I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. I kept thinking, someone on your side will get this news, just like our mothers. They will grieve just as much. They will cry just as much. They will be just as angry. He looked up at me with reddened eyes. So what did you do? He asked. On the 4th day, I got up and continued fighting, I said, because understanding you doesn't mean justifying you. Silence fell between us like another blanket. Then, from the far corner of the darkness, Kolya's voice came, unexpectedly quiet. You know, he said, I used to be worse. I turned toward the voice. Hard to imagine. He smiled without humor. I was a contractor in Syria, he said. Different desert, same shit. You do one bad thing, then another. It gets easier. You stop feeling anything. And then one day I saw a boy there, maybe 10 years old, who looked at me as if I wasn't even human. Not scared, not angry, just disgusted. As if I were something to be scraped off his shoes. I still remember his face. That was when I first thought, maybe I've lost something I can't get back. He moved, rattling his chains. It's the same here, he continued. You think that making fun of that old man with bread is just a joke, just cruelty. And then, later, in some storeroom, you realize that you traded part of your soul for that laughter.
Bad deal.
I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to spit, to tell him he deserved everything he had lost. Another part of me, the traitor, heard the crack in his voice and felt something like pity. That scared me more than any shell, because if I start feeling sorry for them, will I still be able to do what needs to be done when the time comes? Am I becoming weaker? Or is this some other kind of strength, one that doesn't fit into military stories? Over the next few days, the emotional roller coaster continued. One minute I was furious, remembering their jokes about pretty fireworks. The next minute I was looking at the guy with the headphones and feeling a sharp, bitter sadness that someone had to carry their guilt around in their pocket like that. Slowly, very slowly, the burning rage cooled into something heavier and darker. No less decisive, but less theatrical. Fewer screams in my head, more quiet decisions. I stopped fantasizing about revenge in vivid detail. Instead, I began to think more about protection, about the lines on the ground that we had to hold so that children in the cities behind us could continue to go to school, fall in love, and argue with their parents over silly things. Acceptance did not come in some grand spiritual moment. It crept in through the little things. The way we automatically shared our rations with a civilian who had strayed into our position while searching for his missing dog. The way one of our medics treated a wounded Russian's leg with the same rough care he gave our own guys. The way that when a shell fell too close and everyone rushed to find cover, we all ended up in the same dirty ditch. Ukrainians and Russians, guards and prisoners, instinctively forgetting for a moment who was who. It is impossible to live forever on hatred alone. It burns you out from the inside. War demands a lot, but it does not reward those who know how to hate the most with medals. One night, lying in a trench and looking at a patch of starless sky, I realized something simple and terrible. If I come out of this war with only anger in my heart, they will take not only our buildings and roads, they will take me too. I decided I wouldn't let that happen, so I started making little promises to myself, tiny, almost invisible ones. I won't mock prisoners, no matter what they've done. I won't rejoice in anyone's suffering. I will remember the names of their victims longer than their jokes. And if I have to kill, I will do it as cleanly and quickly as war allows, not for entertainment. Was that acceptance? Maybe. Not of what they did. I will never accept that. But of the fact that war is filth. People are filth. And if I wait for the world to make sense before I act, more innocent people will die. The strength that people think I have? It's not muscle. It's not bravery. It's not some kind of unshakable patriotism. It's simply that I decided to preserve my humanity, even if it meant wading through mud and spilling blood. I didn't know yet what that meant in practice. It became clear later when orders came in and I had to choose what kind of man I wanted to be in a war that brings out the worst in people. That choice changed everything. The decision did not come accompanied by trumpets and flags waving dramatically behind me. It came in a dirty yard behind a broken shed as I washed a metal cup with snow. We received an order. In the morning, the prisoners would be transported to the rear. Our unit would move forward to a new position, a new hell, new trenches, the same old sky. I looked at my reflection in the water that had collected in the cup, distorted, tired, older than my passport said I was. What now? I asked myself. What will you be like in this situation? After all, that was the real question. Not whether the war was justified. I knew why I was fighting. Not whether they were guilty. There was too much evidence of that. The question was what this war would do to me. So I made a decision. I decided that my job was not revenge. My job was to stand between people like the villagers and people like Kolya and his rockets. To block the road with my body if I had to. To push them back, not just because I hated what they were doing, but because someone had to say enough and mean it. I decided that I would fight hard, but not dirty. No mocking of prisoners. No jokes about beautiful fireworks when our artillery hit their positions. Never knock the bread out of someone's hands. If I see one of our guys doing that, I'll stop him. Not because I'm better than him, but because I know what this little cruelty can turn into if it's encouraged. I decided that I would report everything I saw. Every story, every act of humiliation or bombing of civilians, I wrote it down when I had the chance and told everyone who wanted to listen. Our commanders, journalists, investigators, some future court that I may never see. If the Russians wanted to turn people into statistics, I did the opposite. I turned them back into names, faces, memories. Did you shoot in a supermarket? Fine. The world should know who died in the third row. And I decided one more thing, the hardest thing. I will not allow myself to stop feeling. Indifference is convenient. It's tempting. It makes it easier to fall asleep. But it also makes it easier to cross boundaries that you swore you would never cross. So when I felt anger, I allowed myself to be angry. When I felt sadness, I didn't suppress it so much that it turned into something worse. I cried once, quietly, when no one was looking, thinking about the girl on the Russian's phone, about the old man's crushed bread, and about the boy without music. Did that make me weaker? Perhaps in the short term, but in the long term, it preserved something in me that I will need when all this is over. The transport truck arrived at dawn, a cold engine, even colder faces. We lined up the Russians, checked their handcuffs, filled out paperwork that none of us had the patience for. As they were about to be loaded, the man with the headphones hesitated, then turned to me. "Here," he said, holding them out awkwardly, "for the boy, if you ever find him." I looked at the cracked plastic, the silly dinosaur stickers. "Keep them," I said. He blinked in surprise. "Why?" "So you don't forget," I replied. "One day, when you tell yourself that it wasn't so bad, I want you to look at them and remember exactly how it was." His hand trembled as he took them. He nodded sharply. Kolya shuffled past, rattling his chains. He smiled at me, but there was something else in his eyes. Less playfulness, more, I don't know, awareness. "Maybe we'll see each other in The Hague," he joked. Start rehearsing your story, I replied. They'll want details. He laughed briefly. Don't worry, he said. For the first time, I think I'll tell the truth. The artillery guy was the last to leave. He lingered, searching for words, then gave up and simply said, I'm sorry. I didn't say, I forgive you. That would have been a lie, and he didn't deserve any more lies. So I said, okay, hold on to that. It's the beginning of something. Don't waste it. They drove away, and the rumbling truck, full of contradictions, disappeared down the frozen road. We shouldered our gear and returned to the front. Bogdan walked beside me, adjusting his helmet once again. Have you ever thought that this will end? He asked. Yes, I replied without hesitation. How can you be so sure? Because it has to end, I said. Because if it doesn't, then we're just animals gnawing at each other forever. And I refuse to believe that all this pain is for nothing. He thought for a moment. What have you learned from these guys? He asked. From the fact that they're here. I took a breath, tasting metal, cold, and old smoke. That monsters aren't born with horns, I said. They're made. One small cruel act at a time. One cowardly excuse at a time. One I was just following orders at a time. What about us? He asked. What does that mean for us? It means we watch ourselves, I replied. We keep our defenses up, inside and out. We don't become the people we're fighting, no matter how hard they try to drag us into the same mire. If you are reading this and find yourself in a similar situation, war, occupation, some other kind of hell, here is my advice, however you may feel about it. Don't romanticize your anger. Anger is useful, but it is a tool, not a home. Use it to move, to act, to defend. Don't fall asleep in it. It will rot you from the inside. Set your boundaries in advance. Decide now what you will not do, regardless of what orders you are given, regardless of what the enemy does first. Decide this while you are not exhausted, frightened, or angry. When the moment comes, you will not have time for philosophy. Remember the civilians first. Not the flags, not the speeches, not the slogans. The grandmother hiding in the basement, the boy with headphones, the girl with a teddy bear. That's who you're fighting for. When everything else gets confusing, hold on to them. See your enemy clearly, but don't romanticize them. They are not demons from another planet. They are flawed, weak, easily manipulated people who have chosen the easy evil over the difficult good. Knowing this does not excuse them, but it prevents you from turning this into a fairy tale where cruelty is inevitable. It is not. It is a choice. Plan who you want to be after this. One day, if you are lucky, you will return home. You will sit at the kitchen table, drink tea that does not taste like rust, and you will have to live with the version of yourself that you brought back with you. Fight so that you can look at yourself in the mirror in the future. And what about me? I'm still here, still in uniform, still hear rockets sometimes, still see the faces of people I couldn't save, and people I had to kill. None of this will go away anytime soon. But I am still myself. I still laugh with my brothers in the trenches. I still share my last cigarette. I still carry photos of my family in my pocket, not as some tragic symbol, but as proof that there is something worth returning to. The war in Ukraine, which has been going on since 2022, has shown me the worst in people: mockery, cruelty, rockets aimed at bedrooms. But it has also shown me the best: medics treating enemies, volunteers driving under active fire to evacuate strangers, soldiers clinging to their humanity as if it were their last weapon. In the end, strength is not how much you can destroy, it's how much you can endure, without losing the part of yourself that refuses to become like those who started this inhuman circus. That's the line I drew. That's the line I still hold.